President Putin claims sanctions imposed on Russia represent the biggest current threat to the world economy.
I'm talking about the West sanction fever. Its brazen and aggressive attempts to force others on how to behave, deprive them of their sovereignty and force them into submission.
But the European Union isn't backing down. It's outlined plans to introduce a price cap on Russian gas. That's the fact that the European Union has outlined plans to introduce a price cap on Russian gas after President Putin threatened to cut off all energy supplies if such a step was taken. Now, EU governments have accused Moscow of using energy to blackmail them in retaliation for Western support for Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg reports.
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Putin.
In his energy war with Europe, a fresh salvo today from Russia's president. Vladimir Putin warned, if the West does what it's threatening and imposes a price cap on Russian energy exports, say goodbye, Europe, to Russian oil and gas.
It's an absolutely stupid decision. We will not supply anything if it's contrary to our interests. In this case, our economic interests. We will not supply gas, oil or coal. And they are not in a position today to dictate to us.
He predicted that Europe would freeze like the wolf's tail froze to the ice in a Russian fairy tale. Speaking of freezing, this sinister music video by the Russian energy giant Gazprom shows Russia switching off the gas to Europe ahead of winter. It's taunting the West after Russia did indeed shut down its biggest pipeline to Europe. In its standoff with the West, the Kremlin sees energy as its trump card, and it's playing it very publicly. The calculation is that cutting energy supplies to Europe will cause such economic pain that European governments will drop the sanctions they imposed over Russia's invasion of Ukraine in exchange for cheaper fuel. Scenes like these give the Kremlin hope. This was Prague on Sunday. Tens of thousands of people protesting at soaring energy bills and demanding an end to sanctions against Russia.
The sanctions against Russia.
So, will European leaders cave in to pressure?
It is a full-fledged energy war. If they capitulate, well, vis-à-vis this blackmail, it is not going to be good for Europe because the same methods are likely to be repeated by the Russian government in the future.
It's going to take time for Europe to reduce its reliance on Russian energy. That means that this winter could be a tough one. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, against the backdrop of those comments from President Putin, the president of the European Commission has said Russia is weaponizing energy markets to punish the EU for imposing sanctions. The EU is proposing a price cap on Russian gas. We can hear now from the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
We aim at lowering the costs of gas, and therefore we will propose a price cap on Russian gas. Of course, the objective is here very clear. We all know that our sanctions are deeply grinding into the Russian economy with a heavy negative impact, but Putin is partially buffering through fossil fuel revenues. So here the objective is we must cut Russia's revenues, which Putin uses to finance his atrocious war in Ukraine.
Ursula von der Leyen there speaking a little earlier. Well, earlier I spoke to Fernando Valle, a senior analyst on oil and gas at Bloomberg Intelligence, and asked for his thoughts on the global energy crisis.
It's difficult to believe that that would achieve its goals because, as Vladimir Putin said in the earlier segment, they are considering cutting off supply altogether if there's a price cap. And typically price caps do lead to lower supply. At the end of the day, there is a trade-off to be had, which is do you continue to increase revenues from fossil fuels to Russia, or do you, but you don't have the impacts on your economy or do you make some economic sacrifices in order to reduce that dependence on Russian fossil fuels over the long term in exchange for short-term pain? Europe is already taking counteractions to mitigate some of those impacts, but as Stephen said, it might be a difficult winter for Europe.
A difficult winter for Europe, as you point out, Fernando, certainly very much an issue facing the new UK Prime Minister. Liz Truss tells us that we'll hear more from her and the plans to tackle soaring energy prices very soon. What are you expecting?
Well, there has been talk of a withholding tax on fossil fuels. There's been obviously a plan to address also the storage situation. Europe and the UK have increased natural gas storage at their fastest clips, even breaking the 2018 record. So they all have set themselves up to mitigate, again, the loss of Russian natural gas. The issue is that if there is a cold winter, there's very little you can do because you need to find new supply. And unfortunately, it takes a really long time to build capacity to export from the US, for example, which has ample sources of natural gas, or the Middle East. But there are alternatives, and I think one of them is to build your capacity for fuel oil, diesel, and coal. And while they're not environmentally friendly, they do help you bridge through to the next winter and push off some of the pressures in the short term.
But there are some other proposals that are also being considered, aren't there, Fernando? A solidarity contribution, for instance, from fossil fuel companies. You know, just to say they have made billions of dollars of profits recently. Why isn't something like that being considered more often?
Well, I think there is a trial to incentivize more production in the medium term to help bridge the gap until there are a bigger percentage of renewables generating power and energy at large. And if you create these taxes, they tend to typically impact the supply because there will be fewer investments. The second part is that the UK and Europe are not as large a producer of oil and gas today. So most of that production is already moved to different parts of the world. And if they are alone in imposing those taxes, there will just be a move to different shores. The US has recently become one of the largest producers of oil in the world. Obviously, the Middle East produces the bulk of the production, and they wouldn't be impacted by those taxes. So if Europe does it alone, it just moves that oil production to different parts of the world.